So here it is. This is the top 5 best top tier jets in War Thunder, in my opinion. I've had a really hard time making this video for a lot of reasons. One of the big ones being every time I was ready to actually get working on this video, some big changes would happen to top tier that just completely changes my list. So if we go back to like when I originally planned to make this video, looked at the list I had prepared then, and we look at the list I have now, they are absolutely nothing alike. And if you're watching this even just 3 weeks into the future, it's very possible that this video is completely obsolete already. So just bear that in mind as we go forward. My opinions on this change every single time there's an update on War Thunder, so this is just my current opinion on the best top tier jets in War Thunder. Before getting into the list, there are 3 things I want to go over real quick. Firstly, the gameplay you see on the screen as I talk about particular jets is in no way going to be having anything to do with anything I'm talking about at any point in the video. It's purely for entertainment purposes. Secondly, this is my opinion on the top 5 best top tiers in War Thunder. Your opinion's probably not going to be the same as mine, and that is completely fine. There are things that these jets do objectively better amongst each other, and there's things that they objectively do worse amongst each other. The point is what is going to matter most to you, as in what do you think makes something the best top tier, is going to be entirely subjective, and you have to understand that as you watch this video. And lastly, let's address the elephant in the room, the J7E2. I've never made a video on it before. I'm probably not going to make a video on it. I have played it. I have played every single top tier jet just to make sure that I was having informed opinions on what it was I was going to be talking about. I do like the J7, it's kind of fun, but there are reasons as to why I didn't actually include it in the top 5. And I know you J7E cultists out there are probably going to be typing your comment right now telling me how stupid I am, because for whatever reason, J7E has an absolutely massive cult following behind it. However, there are a couple things that I just thought kept it out of the list, and don't get me wrong, it is a great plane. The flight performance is nuts, it's got incredible flight performance. The missiles should be a lot better than they are though. This is a completely different topic for another video, but essentially, I don't think the J7E can decide what it wants to be. With the long-range missiles, the close-range flight performance, it's a big contradiction to me. So without further ado, let's get into the actual top 5 list, starting at number 5. Going into number 5, we have the FG Phantom. Now, this applies to both the FGR and the FG1. They're really the same plane, identical. There's like maybe either a 10 kilogram difference in weight or a 10 kilogram difference in thrust, I don't know, but it's not even worth mentioning, and the only real difference is one's going to take off from an aircraft carrier, if there is an aircraft carrier, and one's taking off from the airfield. The FGR2 was a lot better than it is now. I would have even had it in my top 3 if you asked me when I first made my top 15 list. Things have changed though. The Skyflash isn't quite as good as it used to be. Radars have been nerfed quite a bit. However, at the same time, the big ace up the FG Phantom sleeve is those SPAY engines. Having the cracked 0 to Mach 1 acceleration in combination with still having 4 Skyflashes, you know, they've seen better days, let's be honest, but you know, you can make them work, and on top of having the cracked 0 to Mach 1 acceleration, the great energy retention, it all in all results into some pretty good survivability. You still have a Vulcan gun pod, so you've got a pretty damn good gun, even though it's unfortunately in a gun pod. It is what it is, but you know, all in all, the FG seen better days, but it's still a number 5 pick for me. Once again, if you'd have asked me what my top 5 list was just a couple of months ago, I probably wouldn't even have the F4E on there. The meta, however, has changed so damn much in that period of time to where the F4E is just honestly better than it used to be. And overall, for top tier, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. It's just the way the game plays right now. Having the internal Vulcan, having the Agile Eagle, and you know, just all in all being the most maneuverable Phantom without having a big old drag pod underneath your plane, I do find it to be quite effective at getting kills. Of course, you can make the 4 E2s work, though I will say the E2s are probably the worst top tier semi-active radar homing missile you can possibly have right now. They do still work sometimes. You're going to get kills with your E2s every once in a while, but I will say that as of lately, I've been having the most success in my F4E Phantom, using it as basically a Vulcan carrier. I just love using the internal Vulcan. Most of you guys who've been following my channel already know that about me. Vulcan, very underrated, top tier tool. And then combine that with the excellent Agile Eagle flight performance and overall pretty good low speed acceleration. It's 0 to Mach 1 time is not bad at all. I think the MLD only narrowly beats it because of its top end acceleration, but the F4E does actually out accelerate the MLD at the lower end speeds. So, you know, it just depends on what you value the most. Personally, I like being aggressive with the F4E. It's very underestimated oftentimes as a turn fighter. Not that I'd recommend turn fighting with it, but it definitely can do it, especially when compared to other Phantoms. And again, a little while ago, of course, the FG Phantom would have been higher on the list than the F4E in my opinion, but just so much has changed once again. The FG's, I guess, positive traits aren't quite as big of a deal anymore as, say, the F4's positive traits. They're not really going to change because they're pretty solidified into the core roots of the plane. You know, having Agile Eagle, having an internal Vulcan, absolutely massive for me. And of course, having 4 E2s is never a bad thing either. As you see in some of these clips, they can of course be viable weapons. I do realize that a lot of people struggle with playing the F4E, and honestly a lot of people are probably going to disagree with my top 5 list, just because I don't have necessarily the most easy planes to get a bunch of frags with on the list. However, I do think that the picks I have, in my opinion of course, are kind of in the order of what is going to be the most valuable in the hands of the top percent of players at top tier. And, you know, maybe even the top percent of players at top tier disagree with this list too, that's fine. But just in my opinion, I feel like the F4E in the hands of a pretty damn good top tier player is going to be able to make more use out of it than they would with something like the FG, because you don't have a gun pod slowing you down, and while you don't have the 0 to Mach acceleration the FG has, you can actually turn a little bit with some of the MiG-23s. You can outturn every Phantom for that matter. You can even give a Viggen a run for its money depending on what kind of fuel loads you're both on when fighting. I will say that I often run 20 minutes on the Phantom, and by the time I actually get into actual dogfighting, which tends to happen toward the end of the game, I'm on just about 8 minutes of fuel, something along those lines, and the F4E's flight model at low fuel loads is ridiculous, as this MiG-23M is going to find out the hard way, and as really a lot of MiG-23Ms find out the hard way when I'm playing F4E at top tier. Some of you might think it is incredibly stupid, but hear me out. When I take off from the runway, as of late, what I like doing is run that 20 minutes of fuel, but I also like shooting off every single one of my AIM-9Js right when I get off the runway. I usually just shoot at the sun or something like that if it's available to me. And then, on top of that, I like to shoot off 2 of the E2 Sparrows. I want to make this plane as light as possible, and as long as you get rid of all of the AIM-9s, you're essentially flying without the pylons, because for whatever reason, the pylons aren't actually modeled as parasite drag in War Thunder. For me, making the F4E lighter increases its capability as a gunfighter, and I can just make better use of it that way, of course, in my opinion. I'm sure that there is plenty of people that rolled their eyes in disappointment seeing the F4E on my top 5 list, but there's probably also the same people raising an eyebrow in surprise at my pick for number 3 here as the F4J. When I made the F4J video, I had a very low opinion on it. The radar sucked, the AIM-7F kind of sucked, it had to carry a gun pod, it has no Agile Eagle, it really did not have a lot going for it. In fact, most people would take out the AIM-7E2s over the AIM-7F, and at that point, well, why don't you just use like an FG Phantom or something like that? It's literally just better in every way at that point. However, changes have been made. The game is different, once again, as I keep saying throughout the video, and the AIM-7F is actually pretty much the best semi-active radar homing missile in the game, only beaten out, in my opinion, by the R-24R on the MLD. They're both great missiles, and which one you prefer is entirely down to preference. I, of course, am not going to be mad about having either. Now, with the new AIM-7F that we have in game, getting those cracked 15-20 kilometer shots is not actually all that uncommon anymore. Now, back in the day when the F4J first came out, if you were getting that coveted 20-25 kilometer kill with the AIM-7F, it was more so down to the target not being that good at the game than it was the AIM-7F being crazy. While it is kind of crazy just to think about that this missile even had that potential at the time, this still wasn't all that cool to write home about for the missile specifically. As I said, it's more so about your target not knowing what they're doing. However, now that the AIM-7F has been made so much better, it is actually not uncommon, as I said, to get those super far range kills. Your tracking rate has been increased, the missile just all around tracks better, and it also tracks better off of the rail, or I should say it tracks sooner off of the rail, something more comparable to the E2 Skyflash. E2, Skyflash, same thing. You know what I'm trying to say. So other than the AIM-7F, why do I have the F4J at the 3 spot on the top 5 list? And really, there's no answer to that question because the AIM-7F has single-handedly carried the F4J onto the number 3 spot, especially so the fact that it gets 4 of them. In my experience at top tier, the AIM-7F is currently one of the highest probability of kills missiles that I have at my disposal, and considering I have every missile in the game at my disposal, that's quite the statement. Of course, once again, I do think the R-24 has it beat just by a slight margin, but again, it's so slight that it's just down to personal preference at that point. But I will say that having the AIM-7F is probably, as long as you don't die at the very beginning of the match, it's at least 2 guaranteed kills. If not, if you are more conservative with how you launch, make sure you get a good launch, then of course you can make all 4 of those AIM-7Fs connect, as a lot of maneuvers that work in defeating the other shorter range Fox 1 missiles just simply do not work on the AIM-7F, and it is a completely unique beast to have to learn how to fight against. Of course, on release, I was also complaining about the F4J's radar, and while it is still a bad radar in comparison to everything else, every radar is bad at this point, so what does it really matter? On top of that, I will say, not entirely because of the AIM-7F that it's at number 3, it does have 4 AIM-9Gs, which, at least in the current game, are the most strong Fox 2 missiles in my opinion, simply because if somebody sees a Fox 2 being launched at them, they're simply just going to flare it away. And anybody that says flares are not consistent, flares don't work half the time, why is it ignoring my flares? Simply a skill issue. I promise you, you can one flare every single Fox 2 in the game, except the R-24T maybe, that is a little bit different, but it's easily overcame rather, if you know the little techniques about doing it. So with all that being said, I just would rather have the extended range that the AIM-9G offers. Because of that extended range, I find it is a little bit more likely to get kills on people that don't see you launching at them in the first place, because that's the only way you're gonna get kills with Fox 2 missiles is people don't see it coming. And it's kind of contradictory because the longer burn time equals the longer range, but the longer burn time also means that that missile marker is going to pop up on your screen for a little bit longer. But in the end of the day, I think it's more so about people just not expecting anything to be actually coming at them if it's not in the immediate vicinity of them, and therefore they're not paying attention for missile markers outside of, say, 3-4 kilometers, and that's easily within the range of the AIM-9G. And while the AIM-9G does not pull the most amount of Gs out of all of the Fox 2 missiles, 18G is enough, especially combined with the fact that the field of view on that Seeger is absolutely massive, and especially so when you think of the fact that the AIM-9G has no maximum G overload. So you can be pulling as hard as you want, try to pull as much lead as possible before launching, and you're not limited to the amount of Gs you're pulling in the plane. That is definitely a great addition to the F4J, but overall it's mainly just because the AIM-7Fs are really fantastic. Let's be honest, most people are probably expecting this aircraft somewhere on this list, and really most people are probably expecting it as the number 1 spot. My number 1 spot, obviously not the MLD. It's gonna blow your socks off when you figure out what it is. I'm gonna get a lot of hate in the comments. Please just try to hear me out for that portion of the video, but for now let's talk about the MLD. Not that there's that much to talk about the MLD in the first place. This plane, since its introduction, has been absolutely cracked. It's been a top 3 contender for the best jet in the game ever since it came out. That's not the same, or the same can't be said for the rest of the jets on this list. They've moved around so much to where, you know, they really could have been anywhere at any given update. What do you get when you're flying the MiG-23 MLD? Well, for one, I'm just going to go over this part because it's little known about the MLD, is your MTI mode, also known as, I guess, a budget pulse Doppler. it is essentially Pulse Doppler. In functionality, it's pretty much the same way. The only difference is how it actually works, and if you want to be a nerd and get into the technicalities of it, then go for it. But if you're just using it, then all you need to know is it's going to behave pretty much exactly like Pulse Doppler, with the only caveat being that it is a low altitude only radar mode, and I think the cutoff is like 2,800 meters altitude, something like that, and then you no longer have access to it. But what's so special about it if it's basically worse Pulse Doppler, right? Well, not exactly, because MTI does not actually, at least when I tested a little while ago, does not actually give an audio RWR warning. If you're getting locked in MTI mode, you will see a visual lock on your RWR, but it's not actually going to make the lock sound. It's just going to have the passive tone to it, and it's probably only going to happen once, and then it'll be a visual only lock. So if you're getting killed by the MLD, just randomly, you flared, it had to have been an R24T, right? Because you didn't hear the RWR? Well, not exactly. It may have been an R24R in MTI mode, so just bear that in mind. Speaking of the R24R, as I said earlier in the video, absolutely cracked missile. By far my favorite Fox 1 currently. I used to be a big Skyflash fan, used to be a big E2 fan, back when they first came out anyways, but now the R24R is just it. And the flight performance of the MiG-23 MLD just speaks for itself. You can outrun everything, and you can outturn everything. Enough said about that. Stop! Wait. Before you go writing your angry comment, tell me how stupid I am, just hear me out. Maybe you'll kind of see where I'm coming from. The F5E, of course, when I first made my top 15 list was at like, I don't know, something ridiculous, like number 13 or something like that. It was not high on the list whatsoever, and for good reason. No Pulse Doppler radar, no Fox 1s, it was a Fox 1 meta, it was a Pulse Doppler meta. The more Fox 1s you had, the better Pulse Doppler you had, the better your plane was. That was actually kind of the rule of thumb for a good while in top tier. That is just not the case anymore. And it really comes down to the missiles being nerfed. The Doppler gate of most of the Fox 1s has been nerfed dramatically to where notching them is extremely, extremely easy, and you've got to be a real monkey to die to missiles that you see coming at you anymore. On top of that, radars themselves have also been nerfed. I think maybe only in Pulse Doppler mode. Regardless, radars did take a pretty big nerf. And changes that I just mentioned are what is responsible for my list moving around so much over time. As I said, things like the FGR2, the EJ Kai, Pulse Doppler, E2 carrying Phantoms were definitely at the top of the list, and now it's just shifted so much to where the meta is so murky anymore. And I think the F5 is everything that you need in a top tier jet at the moment. It's a plane that is extremely survivable, and I think that is the most important thing to have in a top tier aircraft, is just be survivable. Because while it is easy enough to dodge missiles individually, it's not necessarily easy enough to dodge 4 of them coming at you from 4 different aircraft. The F5, that's not so much of an issue. You can have a significant numbers disadvantage on you. You find yourself in a bad situation, and the flight performance of the F5 will get you out of it. The energy retention is insane. The turn rate is insane. You can bleed speed if you really need to. You can slow down if you really need to. But if not, it's pretty damn hard to get this plane below Mach 0.9 in a single turn. If you get caught with your pants down, it is pretty damn easy with the F5E to be able to make it back to your teammates and get some help. That just sounds like you're getting carried, but make no mistake, you can absolutely control matches in the F5E, and in my opinion, this plane has the highest skill ceiling of any other top tier jet in the game right now. While of course you could make arguments that things like the MLD, the J7E will still beat it in a 1v1, sure, but how often are you actually going to be getting sustained 1v1s in real top tier matches? It just doesn't happen. You're going to be juggling multiple targets at once, you're going to be switching targets, you're going to be helping teammates, you're going to be making your way 10 kilometers across the map to go to a different target in the span of 10 seconds. 1v1s just aren't it. And having a plane with fantastic guns, fantastic energy retention, survivability, a reasonable amount of countermeasures, and while it does only have 2 missiles, they are AIM-9Js, which are not bad. So all of that put together, and you have a plane that can really just grab a match and do whatever it wants with it. And I hate to be the guy that says something like if flown properly or in the right hands, because those are absolutely cringe terms and I don't like hearing them. But I will say, as I said earlier in the F5 segment, that this plane has an extremely high skill ceiling for top tier. Well, as high of a skill ceiling as as high of a skill ceiling as you can have in top tier, and I think that the best players in the game are going to be able to impact and control a match most effectively and do the most for their team with the F5 than any other plane in the game. You can kind of be a sheepdog, if you want to think of it that way, and completely herd the enemy team into doing what you want to do. The F5E is a complete 100% rat plane, in that you can just do full 180s on people, follow them around all game, and just make sure that they do nothing to contribute to their team, and you're still doing something to help yourself win. You can literally be the furball in the F5E, and that way you're kind of baiting at all times, you're bleeding people of energy, they always have something to worry about because the F5 is impossible to get off of your 6, and all in all it's just never easy to kill because it's always going so damn fast, it's got great countermeasures, and it's just a slimy bastard to shake off. So yes, cringe, in the right hands, I do think that the F5 is going to have the most potential to have a huge positive impact for the team it's on. So that's my top 5 list. The top 5 worst is probably going to come out not too long after, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until then, I hope I'll see you on the next one.